This is a podcast about our lived experience, which unfortunately includes infant death and subsequent mental health struggles. Please take good care of yourself and only listen if this content feels safe for you right now. We'll still be here when you're ready.
Hi, I'm Judith.
And I'm Alina. We both lost babies to SIDS in winter 2021.
In the throes of grief, I reached out to a stranger on the internet and our friendship was born.
In the years since, we've been working hard to survive, rebuild, and navigate the continual challenges that have come our way, including divorce,
Job loss,
dating while bereaved,
moving multiple times,
health scares,
pregnancy and parenting a living child,
starting new jobs, and so much more.
We are tired.
Happily ever after is out of the question for us, but this podcast documents our journeys to happier ever after because we believe life after loss is worth living.
So join us as we laugh, cry until we laugh.
Welcome to As Long as I'm Living podcast.
We're so glad you're here.
Wait, did you hear about this study about tampons?
What? No.
A new study came out. They'd never studied tampons before, okay? A new study came out. I know.
Man.
There are heavy metals and arsenic in our tampons.
Stop. Honestly, this doesn't even surprise me.
So you know what I thought to myself? Like, I knew that because my vagina is allergic to that.
Your
so
vagina hates tampons. She also hates toilet paper.
She hates toilet paper too. But I do think that I'm not surprised, and I bet there's arsenic and heavy metals in our toilet paper.
There probably is. What do you think my menstrual cup has arsenic and heavy metals?
No, it probably has microplastics.
Yep, I bet so. Anyway.
Okay, Alina, we are doing something that has been on our mind for a long time. We have a very important, we have something really important to tell you guys. An announcement. Where do we start? Let's start here. Let's say this. Alina does all the editing for this podcast.
We have released 154 episodes of this podcast. 155.
And Alina has done every episode of editing.
I have edited every single one with my bare hands.
And it can take, it could take up to 3, 4, 5 hours sometimes. If we have an interview, if the audio isn't great because I move my head, if we use the wrong platform. So it's a time consuming process. If you multiply 150 times like a couple hours, it's a very, very, very long time for Alina to be doing editing. And one of the things that we learned in this most recent break is that Alina needs a break from editing. It's becoming to be unmanageable. Not unsustainable. Is that a word?
Unsustainable. I would say that's a good word. Unsustainable for the very long term. And something that I think we realized over the break is we every once in a while need a break from the recording. Like that feels very important to us. I think I also separately realized like, oh shit, like great, I needed the break from the recording, but then we were going to come back and I was like, fuck, like now I have to edit. Like I was so behind. And I also just want to say, like, you guys probably know this from listening. I'm not a professional editor. So it takes me much longer than like, if you're imagining like a podcast service, like it takes a long ass time. I used to edit our podcasts in Windows Movie Maker, you guys. Like, I use free tools. We used to pay $1 a month for an audio leveler because we could not get our shit together to not like have one of us be really quiet and one of us be really loud. And I didn't know how to do that in my free tool. And turns out I could have done it in my free tool the whole time, but I'm a dum-dum.
Well, and then we came to you guys 2 years ago and said we need to raise some money because we needed some equipment, like we needed better microphones and we needed this software, whatever that Alina told me we needed. And we needed like a professional Canva account. So we came to you guys and you gave so generously and we thought it was going to take a month to raise the amount of money that we needed, but we raised it in like 1 week? 1 day?
I think it was like 4 days.
4 days. It was like shocking to us all. And we haven't done anything like that since because the need hasn't come around, and this is not for profit. We are not a nonprofit and we are not for profit. We're just two girls and a microphone and very bad lives. So that's all to say. And I don't know if we want to keep that form and who wants to listen to that, but that's all to say that we have come up with an idea that we hope feels good to you as it feels good to us, as it feels comfortable to us. So in part of this process, Alina, this is going to be its own episode, and then we're going to have to like record sound bites because there's so much to go through right now. But basically, one of the things that we have decided, we decided Alina can no longer be responsible for editing all of our podcasts. And so we have started the process of looking into podcast editors.
Yes.
And at the same time, in order to afford that, we need to find a way to bring in some money to cover the cost of editing.
Mm-hmm.
And some people might say, well, why don't you just get like a sponsor? Okay, first of all, who wants to sponsor Two Dead Baby podcast? Like,
I'm just thinking, like, in this episode of Alina's Bad Day, like, we're crying, and then it's like, sponsored by Blue Apron.
Exactly. First of all, does it feel comfortable? Because what we're going to talk about, like, who wants to be associated with us? But also, I think we really are sensitive to this idea that we don't want to capitalize on people's grief and healing, and that doesn't feel good to try and sell, quote unquote, something to people who are in the midst of grief, and it doesn't matter.
Like, you guys are not a customer base or like a commodity. You know what I mean? Like, you are bereaved parents, and we are bereaved parents. Like, this is not our job. Like, this is a healing path for us, and we know it's a healing path for you. And that just doesn't feel good. Like, even something like, we were joking, like okay, Kleenex could sponsor us. Like, cool, great. Or like BetterHelp therapy, fine. But like, you know, like even that, it just like doesn't feel quite right.
It doesn't feel right.
So that didn't feel good. I'll also say, like, we have been approached by companies to sponsor us. They haven't, to put it mildly, have not aligned with our mission. Like, Judith,
like
do you remember?
Pet food.
Do you? There's a couple that like come to mind. There's the pet food. We got a request.
Toddler baby clothes.
Yes.
Toddler clothes.
We get requested all the time. I saw your baby and he's so cute. Would he like to be a model for like whatever? And we're like, this is a dead baby page.
Yeah, not a good fit. And then
the other one that made me laugh so much, like, was this shapewear company. I actually considered it because it was right before my wedding and I was bloated from IVF and I was like, should I take up this like shapewear sponsorship and get free shapewear? Anyway, all this to say, we didn't clearly obviously do that. All this to say, we've been approached to sponsorship before and we're like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
Well, okay, no. Another thing is we've been approached very generously and thoughtfully sometimes by a family foundation or a foundation that does work in the lost space, which is absolutely wonderful and beautiful, and I love it. However, we're not a nonprofit. So because of the laws around foundation giving, we cannot benefit from that. And we're not a nonprofit. We're just two people with a microphone. That's all to say that we want to think of more creative opportunities. But we came up with an idea. We actually pitched it to you guys on Instagram and people really liked it. So now we want to give you more details to this idea. And I think we need a catchy name. What about like a sponsor spotlight or we
should throw it out on Instagram and ask people what we should call it.
Someone should come up with a great idea for the name of this. Basically, the idea is we want to invite people to sponsor an episode, help underwrite the cost of editing for that episode, and we will use that to share with our entire community your child or your family and express our gratitude, but also as an opportunity to tell people a little bit about your babies, to speak their name, to talk about things that remind you of them. Like, we want to spend time sharing more people's family in our community, not just talking about Aiden and Quinn.
It has felt so meaningful to us over the years how many of you know our babies, know their stories. Like, we get messages on their birthdays, or someone will say, oh, I saw an owl mug and it made me think of Quinn, or you know, Wheels on the Bus made me think of Aiden's birthday cake, and like all these things, right? And it has been so special. And this just feels like a way to invite your babies into our community in a way we haven't been able to do before. Because we get to know your babies through our DMs, but there's a community aspect to this too.
Or if you have an anniversary of someone that you know lost their child and you think it would be meaningful for them to sponsor something like the podcast that helps so many other people. You know, you can do this as a way to honor your friends' children that have passed away, or your nieces or your nephews. It doesn't have to just be parents talking about their children.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I think this is just a beautiful way to highlight all the beautiful children that we've lost communally, like collectively. Yeah.
Like if you're a bereaved aunt and you know that the bereaved mom, your sister, listens to the podcast, and you can surprise her with a sponsorship episode, or like give it as a birthday gift or something. I think, I don't know if we're crazy. I don't know how many people are going to be into this, but like Judith said, we asked on Instagram and people were remarkably supportive, actually, of this idea. And I think before we get into the nitty gritty of like how much this would cost and all of that, the thing that I feel is really important that we say is that our content is free and it will remain free. There is no part of this where we're like, you only can listen to this podcast if you sponsor us every month or whatever, blah, blah, blah. This is a way for those of you who have the means and the desire to support this podcast and to get your baby's name on the podcast. This is a way for you to do that. This is not something anybody has to do. And if this feels weird and icky for you, that's fine. You don't have to do that.
Maybe we're totally off base. But here's what I'll say. It feels good for me to know that Aiden's memory helps other people through this podcast. And there have been times where I want to remember him and I want to honor him by helping our lost community. And so, like, I'll support the organizations that provided support groups to me. I know Alina does something similar with the support groups that meant a lot to her. I one time supported a retreat, like a lost mom retreat that I went on. So we're kind of envisioning it something like that. So Alina, tell people how they can do this. And I want to just say that there are going to be two opportunities. One is to sponsor a new episode, and one is to sponsor an episode that's already been in the past. We'll say that we have people who are constantly finding the podcast, and so they're working their way through it. So Alina, give everyone the nitty gritty. Like,
Yes. Okay. So there are 3 ways you can support As Long as I'm Living podcast financially. And before I even get into this, I'm just going to say this feels incredibly uncomfortable for me. It feels really, really, really uncomfortable. I'm just putting myself out there. I'm doing it. Okay. I'm saying it. I'm going to say numbers. Here I go. Okay. So the first way to support us is you can just do a one-time. You can donate one time. And I use the word donate. Again, we are not a nonprofit. This is not tax deductible, but you can support us with a one-time donation.
Sponsorship?
One time, you can give us money one time of any amount. The second way you can support us is you can become a member, a sustaining member to support the podcast at different tiers, $5, $10, or $50 a month. That's 50. The $5 a month tier helps us with miscellaneous podcast costs like hosting fees. And then I also wrote here, Judith, you'll laugh, the inevitable hardware replacements for the next time Judith drops her microphone.
Alina got me these new headphones, like part of the money that you guys gave like 2 years ago, I think went towards these like headphone things that have this microphone attached because I'm so bad at it. So now it's like permanently fixated to my head. But it's apparently made things a lot easier for her.
It did. And then $10 a month, this tier supports us by helping us pay annual fees for our podcast recording and content creation software. And then the $50 a month tier is obviously significantly higher. We throw that in there. If you would like to support the actual editing of podcast episodes, this is probably the best way to do that with a membership. And then finally, this is the thing we're really excited about. Episode sponsorships. So there's 2 ways that you can sponsor an episode of As Long as I'm Living podcast. The first way is to dedicate an upcoming episode to your baby. So what this will look like is you will go to our little website, which you can find in the description, and click the link for dedicate an upcoming episode to your baby. The cost is $125, and this is the actual cost to edit
feel
an
like
episode
Alina's
of the
heart is
podcast.
palpitating.
Like, I am like nauseated right now. Like,
to get the
idea.
$125 out there, it's terrifying. But I just want you to know this entire process, Alina was like, oh my gosh, should we like discount it? And I kept telling her, like, this is the cost. I don't know what. She was like, yeah, but I don't want to ask anyone for that much money. I was like, but this is what it costs us. So do you want to ask me for that money?
$125 is the cost to dedicate an upcoming episode of As Long as Lily podcast to your baby. If you do one of those membership options, there's actually a discount, so it's only $100 if you do a membership option. In addition to that, so you get a discount if you're also a member of the community. So what this is going to look like is in an upcoming episode, we're going to make every effort to release it at a time that's meaningful for you on a topic of an episode that's meaningful to you. We'll reach out and get in touch with you about that kind of thing. But what we're going to do is in the middle of the episode, you'll hear a little beep, boop, 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 boop sponsorship music, and we will talk about your baby. So just a couple of minutes of us sharing something special about your baby, what reminds you of them, what you craved when you were pregnant, like what color they wore in their first outfit, how they died, if that feels important to you, if there's a cause that's important to you. And then we also, with this, if you want, we will include, we will share your baby on our Instagram feed with photos if you'd like. And we can link to your social media or other pages on our Instagram stories in the week that your episode comes out. So you get three things. You get a shout out for a couple minutes in that week's episode that you sponsored. You get a post on our feed with pictures of your baby if you want, and links to organizations that are important to you or your social media on our Instagrams.
So that's option one. Option two.
So that's the new episode. Now, if $125 makes your brain go, ah, like it does for me, we have another option, which is you can dedicate an old episode of As Long as Living podcast to your baby. So this means that one of the 150 episodes we've already released, which sadly people find us every single day. We have people who find our podcast from the beginning and go back and listen. You can dedicate an old episode. You can, if it's available, pick your favorite episode. We will ask you what your favorite episode is. And we will basically do the same thing. So we will go back and add a sponsorship in the middle of those old episodes to your baby. And that only costs $65, or if you're a member, $50. You still get the same thing. You'll get a verbal shout out in the old episode of the podcast and a link to your social media or other pages in the description of the podcast episode. And whenever we promote that older episode, we will mention that it's sponsored by you and your baby on our Instagram.
Okay, so two caveats. The first one is that there might be more than one sponsor per episode. So you might be sharing with another baby, but we will keep it to a limit of one or two or three, no more than that.
And I think that would only happen if there's a week that is particularly meaningful to multiple people. Right. We'll make every effort to spread them out if there's nothing important. But if two babies share a birthday, how cute to be sponsored together. Little birthday
I agree.
Twins.
And then the other thing that I wanted to say is that where can they find this form? Like, what is the website? I know that you can find it in the link to whatever we are, but what is the website?
So you can visit buymeacoffee.com/ALAIL podcast. The acronym for As Long as I'm Living podcast. That's buymeacoffee.com/ALAIL podcast. And that's where you can find all of this stuff. We will include it in the description. If you participated in our fundraiser 2 years ago, it's the same exact website that we used last time. So it's all very straightforward, very simple. You pay through them, so we don't have your financial information or anything like that. And if you do decide to sponsor an episode of the podcast, there's a little form that we'll have you fill out to get some information about your baby, and we'll reach out when we're going to have your episode on, when we're going to have your sponsorship on the podcast.
You did a really great job with that, Alina, and I hope you're really proud of yourself. You did a good job.
Okay, so thank you everybody for listening. We really appreciate you considering this. And again, I cannot reiterate this enough. Like, our content remains free. It will always remain free. Please don't feel in any way, shape, or form like you have to do this. This is just an opportunity for anybody who wants to do this and wants to sponsor the podcast. Our goal with this is that we can keep doing this podcast for as long as we have something to say. And I think what we realized recently is that my capacity to edit this podcast is going to run out way faster than than how many things I have to say. So I think this is just the way we have to do things in order for it to be more sustainable. And also, like, honestly, if you have any other ideas for how we could do this,
if you have a better idea, we have a lot of ideas of things we want to do. We want to make a website. We want to have like someone help us with creating more content on. We have a lot of ideas of how we can take this to the next level, but we're just starting here because this is the bare minimum that we need to get by as Alina is a human. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
And that's that.
If you have any questions, reach out to us on Instagram or as long as I'm living podcast at gmail.com.
And yes, the link is buymeacoffee.com/ALAIL podcast.
Okay. We'll see you guys later.
Bye-bye.
To all of our wonderful new friends, we want to hear from you. Email us at aslongasimlivingpodcast@gmail.com and follow us on Instagram at aslongasimlivingpodcast. We'll get back to you as soon as our grieving brains allow.
Yay!